Hey everybody, Green Films Official here, and welcome to the first video of the year. Now, 2024 was a very interesting year for film with a lot of really great releases. That is not what we are here to talk about today. Those movies will get their time in the sun, don't you worry, but first we gotta eat our vegetables. We gotta talk about the worst movies that came out last year, the real crummy bullshit. I'm fairly positive on this channel, as you probably know, so, sometimes I need to be a little mean just to balance it out, And besides, there can be no good if there is no bad, and sometimes you gotta acknowledge that. So without further ado, let's get right into some truly rancid motion pictures. Argylle. Argylle, Argylle, Argylle. Argylle is the story of author Ellie Conway, the author of the titular Argylle spy novel series, who finds out that the events of her novels turn out to be real. Ooh. A premise that Argylle probably thinks is super original, even though it really isn't. Argylle comes to us from director Matthew Vaughn, who has had a really interesting filmography over the years. He made a little film called Kick-Ass, which I haven't seen, at least not yet, but it has its fans, and you know what? I trust them. I haven't really seen any of the 20th Century Fox X-Men films, aside from Days of Future Past, but his X-Men film is pretty well liked, and you know what? I trust the people who like that movie too. But where I know Matthew Vaughn from is his little film, Kingsman: The Secret Service. And let me tell you, man, it's a pretty sick movie. It's just a really entertaining action comedy spy film made by someone who clearly has a lot of reverence for the genre. And it has what I and many others would probably consider one of the most incredible action sequences ever put to film. But then he made a sequel called Kingsman: The Golden Circle, a film which introduces a device that can basically bring you back from the dead if you've been shot in the head, and I immediately stopped giving a shit. You see, look, here's the thing. Kingsman: The Secret Service is a comedy at the end of the day, but when Harry dies, that's a genuinely shocking moment. It showed that the movie was willing to break the rules, that you could kill a main character and they would be dead for the rest of the movie. It gave the film stakes and consequence, and it made the final showdown really tense because you knew there was a real possibility one of these characters could die. Oh, but consequence is no fun, and people liked Harry, so we gotta invent some bullshit device to bring him back for the sequel. So while Harry was no longer shot and dead, the tension sure was. Like, who cares if Eggsy or someone gets shot in battle now? You can just plug the device into his head and it'll be fine. Like nothing ever happened, 'tis but a flesh wound. I heard The Kingsman was supposed to be a bit better, but no, the damage had been done at that point. I didn't really care anymore. And now, with this all-new movie, Argylle, Matthew Vaughn slips further into cinematic mediocrity. Oh god, it's such a mess. Where do I even begin with this film? This movie does not have a creative bone in its body. It is cinematically flat and narratively bloated. This movie has a really cheap feel because the CGI is so noticeable, and so much of it is just characters friggin' explaining the plot to each other against a green screen. And then I found out the budget was apparently $200 million? Did the entire budget go to the cast? I mean, to be fair, it's a pretty big, star-studded cast. But how does a movie that costs $200 million look this bad? Why does everything that's not an actor look like it was generated within a computer? So they have these scenes where they show the events of Ellie's books, and they got Henry Cavill playing Agent Argylle, right? And the main meat of the plot is kicked off when Ellie meets this guy played by Sam Rockwell on a train, and this guy turns out to be a spy. And then they do this weird thing during the action sequences where Ellie blinks and then suddenly he's Henry Cavill. She blinks again, he goes back to being Sam Rockwell, and then he's Henry Cavill again. So I guess it's like trying to say, oh, she sees him as like a real life Agent Argylle. Fine, whatever. It's kind of weird, but at least it's trying to do something stylistic, I guess. But then later, there's a scene where she's like looking at herself in the mirror and her reflection is Henry Cavill. and they have like a little conversation, and she's like saying, "Oh, you're just a hallucination to help me cope with all this." But then it's like, wait, hang on, why is she seeing herself as Argyle? I thought she was seeing the other guy as Argyle. What's going on, movie? Why can't you be consistent? Eventually, they do explain why she sees herself as Argyle, albeit in a really annoying way that I'm going to get into later. But it still doesn't explain why she was seeing Sam Rockwell as Argyle. If I can give this movie anything, it's that some of the action sequences are conceptually creative and there's some decent fight choreography. One action scene that I thought was interesting was this one that I'm showing on screen right now, this oil skating scene where she's sliding around on oil slicing fools. But it fails to live up to its full potential because, again, the CGI is so noticeable. It feels like a video game. Remember how Matthew Vaughn used to do action sequences that were mostly practical and they looked amazing? And they were brutal and visceral and you felt the impact. Yeah, well now they're all mostly digital and they have no sense of oomph to them anymore. Nothing looks real. This movie cost $200 million. This movie's villain is played by Bryan Cranston, which you think would be something. You think he would be absolutely intimidating because you know Bryan Cranston can do that shit. There are 5 seasons of a really popular TV show that prove he can be absolutely terrifying. But no, he gives a very flat and unmotivated performance. He doesn't even seem like he wants to be there. Such a boring character and such a waste of his talents. Shame on this film for that alone. But the main thing that sucks about Argyle is that its whole foundation is built upon twists. Ooh, once you know the secret, don't let the cat out of the bag. Because being twisty was so much more important than this film just having a good story with characters we care about. About a third into the movie, it does a twist which made me think, oh, okay, this could actually be interesting. But no, it turns out that was a fake twist. It gets subverted in favor of a much less interesting twist because, you know, if it had actually gone in that direction, it would have been unique and interesting. And then one of the twists is, the secret as to why the events of Ellie's books are happening in reality. So much explaining. And the explanation doesn't even make sense. And I know I made fun of the premise before saying it was unoriginal, but once they do explain why the events of Ellie's books are transpiring in reality, then the only thing left for the movie to do at that point is be a generic, uninspired spy movie. With that hook completely removed, there is nowhere interesting left for the film to go. It goes from being uninspired to being even more uninspired after the secret is revealed. I got a cat in the movie just so the audience can go, oh, cute cat. It adds nothing to the film aside from that. And that was really annoying. And I love cats, so you better believe I'm not joking around when I say that. It's just really unfunny, flat, bland comedy and a 2.5 hour runtime. By the time Argyle is over and done with, you're just kind of relieved. You just feel worn out by the time it ends, man. And to rub salt into the wound, there's a post-credit sequence that links it to the Kingsman series, because this movie isn't creatively bankrupt enough. Matt. How the mighty have fallen. Do me a solid, will you? Look at this picture of this bowl of dry oats. Really just stare deep into its soul, metabolize it. Really imagine just how boring those oats must taste. Hell, it's not even that interesting of a picture. It's just like a very basic composition. It's just a bunch of whites. There's nothing. It is a boring picture of boring food. Now, the reason I'm showing you this picture is because I want you to keep it in mind while I discuss our next subject, Twisters. I genuinely don't want to talk about this movie, dude. I genuinely do not want to talk about it. Twisters is maybe my least favorite movie on this list. And I know it's coming at number 4 and not number 1, but here's the thing. It has 3 interesting moments. I nearly said scenes, but the word moments is more accurate. And, I don't know, it's competently made as a film, I guess. But that kind of makes me hate it more, because it's not good enough to be genuinely entertaining. But it's not bad enough to be train wreck fascinating. So it's just stuck in the boring, freaking painful middle where there is no entertainment value whatsoever. This film is grey, flavorless sludge churned out by a factory. Story is nothing. The main character, I could not tell you a thing about her other than that she feels remorse and grief that her friends died in the past, which is so overplayed. This movie has Anthony Ramos giving a terrible, terrible performance. He brutally slaughtered the mood and enthusiasm of every scene he was in. I wanted to go to sleep every frame he was on screen. It's not like he's a bad actor. I've seen him give charismatic performances before. I've seen him be entertaining. So what happened? He is so bad in this movie. Oh my god, and the boring, flat cinematography, the way this movie is shot actually pisses me off. I am of the opinion that the camera is the greatest tool gifted to the art world since the paintbrush. With enough intelligence and creativity, you can do anything with a camera. I've seen films where the distance from the subject and the angle of the camera tells you everything you need to know about what that character is feeling. A camera gives you the opportunity to do so much with so little, and this especially applies to blockbusters. You can take a camera and do a little bit of... and people in costumes surrounded by miniatures turn into giant monsters in cities. Oh, your mechanical shark is malfunctioning and ruining scenes? Put the camera underwater, now you got the shark's POV. You know, for this little film called Star Wars, you know, only one of the biggest cinematic successes in history, they built this model of a giant space station and then they had a camera flying above it on a railing system. And then you watch the movie and it looks like the POV of a spaceship flying through the crevice at lightning speeds and it looks amazing. You have so many opportunities to bring these incredible worlds to life, to immerse your viewer in the world of your film with just how you use the camera. And you choose to shoot every action scene in the most flat way imaginable. And because the CGI is so obvious, nothing feels like it's physically there. I felt no sense of danger, no sense of peril, because all I could see was a studio. And everything feels like it's treated with such a lack of proper urgency. Like at one point, a tornado turns into an F5, and someone's just like, oh, how did it turn into an F5? Doesn't sound worried, he doesn't sound scared, he doesn't even sound like he cares. He just sounds like mildly inconvenienced. Every character is either boring as shit or a cliche cartoon. There is a point in this film where the villain says, I don't care about the people. I don't care about the people. Yeah, real nuanced writing there, fellas. I don't care about the people. I don't care about the people. I got Glenn Powell playing a caricature whose name I refuse to look up. They give him a nickname, the Tornado Wrangler, because he's like this cool cowboy who doesn't play by the rules and he does things his way. And all I could think his entire time on screen is that this is not a real person. They sort of make him out as an antagonistic character for a while, but nope, he ends up being one of the heroes that you're supposed to root for. This film tries to develop these characters and it tries to make you care. It tries to explore the devastation of the aftermath of a tornado, but it's all so surface level that I just don't care. I need you to understand, I tried to like this movie. I really, really tried. And after it ended, I tried to gaslight myself into thinking it was alright. I was like, it was okay. It was like a 6 out of 10. But the more I thought about it, the less I liked it. I just, at this point, consider it an outright bad movie. I felt nothing watching this movie. Nothing. I genuinely feel like I've gained nothing from having sat through it. Now, a lot of people love this movie, including close friends who may be watching this video. And I just want to say that if you do love this movie, more power to you. I am happy for you. I am jealous of you. I wish I liked this movie. I wish I felt an emotion outside of frustration or boredom. I wish I saw the movie that you guys saw. That shit sounds awesome. Again, I must reiterate, I really tried to like this movie, but all I could see was passionless, factory-produced slop. I watched this movie with a friend of mine, and we hadn't seen each other for quite some time beforehand, and genuinely, that was more enjoyable than anything in the movie itself. Having a chat with my mate before and after the movie was infinitely more exciting than the movie itself. Hell, the Skittles I was eating during the movie were more exciting than the movie itself. You know, Argyle at least had the decency to be annoying. I felt things watching that movie. I never want to watch Twisters again. Never. Imaginary is a film with no imagination behind it, a joke that I'm sure has never been made before. Okay, well, that's not entirely fair. There is an interesting concept here. In case you're uninformed, Imaginary is a horror film in which imaginary friends aren't actually imaginary. Instead, they're these entities from another dimension that latch themselves onto children, and in this particular case, the entity that has latched itself onto this little girl is making her hurt herself with the promise that she'll get to visit the place he comes from. That is a genuinely disturbing and messed up premise, and I can see it working really well under the direction of someone like Ari Aster or Jennifer Kent. But no, we're stuck with Jeff Wadlow, who has maybe one of the lamest filmographies a director could possibly have. And now, from the mind behind Truth or Dare and Fantasy Island, we now have, Imaginary. Every character in this movie is a trope. We have the mother who cares but is struggling, the angsty teenage daughter. We got the obligatory exposition character who knows all about the entities. Hell, we even get the creepy kid trope once the little girl starts hanging out with her imaginary friend. We got all bases of unoriginality covered. It feels like this exact movie has been released 1,000 times before as part of Hollywood's continual abuse of the horror genre in the name of making a quick buck. For the second act of the film, it is at least trying to be disturbing. It's doing a shit job at it, but at least it's trying. But then you get to the third act. Oh, the third act. The third act of this movie turns into a, shitty episode of Goosebumps, except that's an insult to shitty episodes of Goosebumps. So much exposition just crammed down your throat. Oh, just awful, awkward, out of place attempts at humor. They name drop Bing Bong 500 times, and it's lame and unfunny the first time they do it, and it only becomes more lame and unfunny the more times they do it. Also, thank you for reminding me of an infinitely better movie that I would much rather be watching, dickhead. Again, it's trying to be disturbing for much of the second act, but then you get to then they just start goofing around. It's like you're watching a different movie. And then they go to the world that the entities come from, and it becomes this shitty Poppy Playtime Kids Bop version of Insidious. And all I could think about was how much better Insidious did it. It's sort of trying to go for this, surrealist tone in this otherworldly plane, but it doesn't work because it's also leaning too much into the Hollywood tropes. Before this point, it was trying to be disturbing. It was failing, but it was trying. And then it just turns into a parody of itself by the end. The first 2/3 are like if you asked an AI to make a horror movie about imaginary friends. And then the last third feels like it's being made by someone who hates horror movies and wants to belittle the genre at every turn. This movie is an abominable, cruel, sick joke. Every once in a while, it can pull an interesting creature design out of its ass, and it has a suitably imaginative premise that could have been so disturbing, but it's wasted on a hack director. A hack director that molds this engaging premise into a template that was exhausted 10 years ago. It is amazing how many shitty modern horror tropes are crammed into this movie. This movie can't help but feel like the product of the horror genre being exploited for years and years. It is indistinguishable from any shitty studio horror film shat out in the last 15 years. In a way, it's like all of those movies molded into one shitty package. And as someone who considers horror his favorite genre, I'm not gonna take this shit. The horror genre is such a great vehicle for both tension, atmosphere, a feeling of dread, but also to explore some of the darkest questions and realities of our world. Horror is one of the most artistically proficient genres there is. Without Jaws, a horror movie, we wouldn't have the summer blockbuster as we know it today. And yet the genre continues to be used to produce films like this. Yippee. Regardless of their actual quality, horror movies are often looked down on by film critics. And then, once in a blue moon, when there is a horror movie that gets the praise it deserves, it isn't just seen as a good movie. No, it's elevated horror. This one's different. John Carpenter is one of the most celebrated and praised names in horror, and yet this is what he has to say on the matter.
They still look down on it, don't they? Well, we've always been looked down on. We're close to being pornographers, just a little above, just a bit.
What do you mean?
That we look. Well, you make
They...
those kind of movies.
And I think this unfair reputation that's been thrusted upon the genre has allowed big studios that produce mainstream horror films to also look down on the genre as cheap shit that can be exploited for money. Yeah, dumb teens like to watch horror movies. We'll just shit one out for cheap and make millions of dollars. I mean, shit, man. At least something like a bad, soulless, factory-produced drama has to pretend it gives a shit. Bad horror movies will continue to exist forever because there will be bad movies forever, but they don't have to be the industry standard. Oh, Madam Web. Oh. Sony Pictures' Spider-Man universe without Spider-Man has continued to drop the ball time and time again. And Madam Web is maybe their biggest disaster yet. I mean it when I say almost every single facet of this movie is wrong. I'm talking the basic fundamentals of filmmaking. This movie kind of fascinates me, just its very existence. Like, how the hell did it get released in this state? This movie was produced by a major motion picture studio. Millions of dollars went into this project, and yet the script feels like it was written by, like, Neil Breen. Except I think maybe Neil Breen is a little more competent. For those of you who are unfamiliar with Neil Breen, here's a clip from one of his greatest hits.
Jim! Call 911! Jim! Jim! How could you have done this? Jim! I can't believe you committed suicide. I cannot believe you committed suicide. How could you have done this? How could you have committed suicide?
Okay, imagine that clip, but it's the entire movie and millions of dollars went into it. That's Madam Web. The acting is so bad. It is genuinely so bad, dude. Every line of dialogue feels like it was written by an alien trying to mimic human language, and it's delivered like an alien trying to mimic human language. There are actors here who have given good performances in the past, but they are horrible here. The directing in this film is actually atrocious. Dakota Johnson, who plays our lead, the titular Madam Web, delivers a legendarily bad performance. She does not feel like she cares about anything that's happening in the story. Her line delivery is so flat and unnatural. It is, I know I said the alien thing before, but it is genuinely alien. And that's not even mentioning the disgraceful editing. It is beyond incoherent and messy. Did a 12-year-old edit this movie on iMovie? The plot of this movie is that our hero, Cassie, gets involved in a freak accident that appears to give her the ability to see the future. And then she realizes that these three girls, who she has a very vague connection to, are being hunted by an evil man named Ezekiel Sims, because he too can see the future, and he sees that they become like spider women who kill him in the future. But not only that, Ezekiel Sims is directly tied to her past. So now she's doing everything she can to save the girls from Ezekiel Sims as he continues to pursue them throughout the city. Whenever Cassie looks into the future, the film tries to be all, ooh, spooky and psychological with it. and it's like, oh my god, what's happening? But it happens like 7 different times, and it's just scenes loop over and over and over again. And after a certain point, it's like, Cassie, surely you know you can see the future at this point. Get on with it. Grinds the pacing to a halt. The dialogue is genuinely juvenile. Like, a lot of people say, oh, was this movie written by a toddler? As an insult. But genuinely, when it comes to this movie, was this movie written by a toddler? That is the only way this dialogue can be explained.
Where's my spider?
They took my spider.
Believe me, it's a good thing you had no idea today was the day you were going to die.
And when you take on the responsibility, great power will come.
This movie's villain, Ezekiel Sims, is easily one of the worst villains I've seen in a movie in years. He is so lame, so unintimidating, so impossible to take seriously. This voice that he's doing is so embarrassing. It sounds like someone who's trying to sound scary and failing horribly. And as many people have already pointed out, a lot of his dialogue is really, really bad ADR. It's so clearly, like, recorded in a booth somewhere, not only because it doesn't, like, line up with his lips, but, like, I guess, like, the sound of his voice just doesn't have the same atmosphere as every other sound in the scene, if that makes sense. There are, like, maybe 3 lines of dialogue from him that sound like they were actually recorded on set. The 3 girls that, Madam Web, or Cassie, or whatever you want to call her, is looking after, are all so poorly conceived characters. They all have the same backstory of their parents leaving them behind in some way. And they're also just such archetypes. They're not real people, they're cliches. Ooh, this one's nerdy and shy, and this one is angsty and rebellious, and this one, this one is so bland, I don't know how to describe her. This movie is a mega embarrassing failure. I cannot believe it was released in this state. And in a way, I kind of recommend it for that reason. This is easily the most interesting of all the films on this list. This movie is like the first 2 Terminator movies and the Mothman Prophecies haphazardly stitched together, except in an alternate universe where those movies are shit. They kill the villain at the end by dropping a Pepsi Cola sign on him. They defeat him with product placement. And that tells you everything about this movie, honestly. Dakota Johnson clearly has zero passion for Marvel superheroes, and watching interviews with her about this movie is genuinely wince-inducing.
Can you name the 3 Spider-Man Tom Holland movies?
Yeah.
Should I just go on faith?
Yeah.
Oh.
Spider-Man, here he comes.
Here he comes. That's
yeah.
number
1.
Yep.
Spider-Man, and he's back. And the other one, the last one is the Goblet of Spider-Man.
So yeah, man, Madam Web is an baffling monstrosity of a film, and one that will probably continue to fascinate me until the day I die. The Last Screenwriter is a movie that was written entirely with ChatGPT and is about a, well, screenwriter who starts to use an AI assistant to help with his screenplay, only to notice that the AI is actually better than he is. Well, anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, please be sure to smash! No, but seriously, we need to talk about this. When I found out what this movie's premise was, I was expecting it to be some pro-AI in the arts bullshit propaganda. But then I found out what this movie was actually trying to say, and I realized it's actually kind of stupider than that. You see, the AI makes our main character miserable. It makes him feel as though his works aren't his anymore. It is a pro-humanity film. It is trying to say that AI should not replace the human being. So, why'd they write it with AI then? The people behind this movie have made it clear they do not think AI should replace the actual screenwriter, and that they simply made this film to show what AI is capable of. But do you not understand that those things contradict each other? Are you trying to make a movie with an anti-AI message, or are you trying to show off what the latest update of ChatGPT can do? The point of this movie cancels itself out, therefore there is no point. You don't need me to tell you that the script in this movie is bad. It constantly goes around in circles, scenes constantly repeat themselves, characters have the same conversation over and over and over again, and it makes this 72-minute long film drag.
Well, true, the world is changing, but never forget, machines may write, but they can't feel.
So what do we do? What do I do?
You write, Jack. You write like only a human can. If AI is the brush, you must remain the artist.
You always know what to say.
What do you mean? This is like the 5th time you've had this exact conversation! Anytime it needs to present an idea, it presents it in the most literal, basic way possible. When he decides to stop using the AI at the end of the movie, he doesn't just stop using it, no, he gets out a baseball bat and he smashes it! And then he pulls out a goddamn typewriter. But the really frustrating thing with this movie is that critiquing its script feels useless because it's being written by a computer. Giving this movie's story feedback will amount to nothing because the feedback isn't going to a human who can implement it. Although none of that is to say that the stuff actually done by humans for this film is any good either. The acting is all so bad. I guess the guy who plays the main character is doing a passable job, but everyone else is... oh god. Whoever is playing this mentor character is extraordinarily terrible. Now, I want to make something very clear. I am not 100% anti-AI. Obviously, AI drives a lot of IT platforms, and I think very sparingly and in very specific scenarios, AI can even be implemented well into the arts. For instance, Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse used AI to help with the animation in a way that wasn't robbing people of their jobs.
About the expression. Form lines to describe the shape of something. A thing like a nose. The effects team did this amazing thing where we had the character designer make a library of drawings. So that was something we could make rules for. This is the way that nose would look from this head angle to camera. And we made a whole bunch of poses that defined that. And the effects team would recreate those in 3D space with those rules of head angle to camera, and then let the machine learning program try and guess where those drawings would go, and a person would correct it every time it was wrong, making it therefore another rule. And little by little, we're teaching the computer to make drawings that we find redundant.
And of course, with like NPCs and enemies and stuff like that, AI is basically essential for like video games. There's this survival horror game called Monstrum. It's procedurally generated, roguelike. The game randomly picks one of 3 monsters for you to go up against before throwing you in, and one of these monsters is called the Fiend. The Fiend is meant to be the most intelligent of the 3, and I have to say, the AI for it is a marvel. The way it almost sort of like strategizes against you, how it cuts you off during chase sequences, how it can shut doors in front of you with its psychic powers. Playing against the Fiend really makes you feel like you're up against a thinking, calculating creature, and that wouldn't be possible without the amazing AI behind it. But there is a big difference between stuff like that and generative AI. AI, like the technology they used for Across the Spider-Verse, is meant to help artists. Generative AI replaces artists. The people behind The Last Screenwriter know this, so they're trying to hide behind, no, our film is an anti-AI! Please, we're not doing anything wrong! But you are! You literally are! You could say that the horrendous writing in this movie proves the point. It's emphasizing the message, but I call bullshit on that. If you want to show that AI is inferior while using AI, there are a million better ways of doing so. And I know this because I was recently directly involved with a project that does do so. Okay, so right now I am currently undergoing a Bachelor of Film Production at university. And last year, there was this guy who was doing, for his honors project, he wrote a script about a job interview. And then he asked ChatGPT to write a script with the same sort of general premise. And then he was going to film both scripts to compare and contrast just how soulless the AI one is by comparison. They were like, yo, anyone looking for experience on a film set, reach out. And I jumped on as soon as possible. I wasn't anything crazy, I was just the gaffer. But being on that set just really affirmed that AI cannot come close to replicating a human writer. The script that he wrote had personality. It had really interesting ideas. It was this moment where the main character who is doing the job interview decides to assert her dominance over the big boss of the company, and they do this thing where they swap places. And I thought that was really cool. The script that ChatGPT wrote was so emotionless, so flat. It read like a shitty commercial. The two characters spoke to each other like, well, robots. The final version of that project is way, way shorter than the last screenwriter and is infinitely superior in conveying what the last screenwriter is trying to convey. Yeah, sure, you could make the argument that it using AI is proving that the AI is bad, but they didn't say that, did they? They said they wanted to show off the capabilities of the AI. There is nothing written by a human to contrast with what's written by the AI, and so the message runs hollow. They couldn't write anything to contrast with the AI because they have no creativity. The last screenwriter is the cinematic equivalent of a serial killer proclaiming that murder is bad. You do not believe a word they are saying because they are actively participating in the thing they are preaching against. And it has nothing good to offer aside from that other than really basic, competent filmmaking. Congratulations, the shot is in focus. It is the worst movie I have ever talked about on the channel and one of the worst movies I've ever seen, period. This movie has no value, it says nothing of substance, and it can piss off. Anyways, if you enjoyed this video, please be sure to smash that like button and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. If you want to check out some of my other socials, I have written stuff over on Letterboxd, Backlogged, Serialized, and Goodreads. And I've also started to post photography and stuff over on my Instagram. So yeah, the link for all of those is down in the description below. And I hope to see you next time when I discuss the top 5 best films of 2024. But until then, bye!